that they are the masters of our destiny. But I believe that the earth was created by a higher form of life than that which presents itself to lead us today. We don't have political leaders. We have misleaders. And consequently, we cannot depend on other men. So anytime you start thinking in terms of government as there to help you and to take care of you, you better do your homework and find out that's only there for one reason: to control you, for your masters. We are living right now, I believe, in Berlin 1939-40. As far as I'm concerned, we need to begin to wake up and find out what freedom is all about and start asking some very serious questions about who is leading us and where are they taking the human family. We are in serious trouble on this earth, and the people who are guiding the destiny of this world are profoundly evil. Their agenda is so profoundly evil, most men are not even able to perceive it. But go back into history a little bit, into 1944, 1945, and look at the concentration camps. Look at the total devastation of human liberty and freedom foisted on the people of Germany and the rest of Europe, but ultimately on the whole world. And you will begin to realize what's coming for America. We are truly living in the last days. There is no doubt in my mind about that. But the last days of what? We're going to confront those who have created us. I believe that we are on the precipice of a whole new civilization which is coming on the earth. And I think that this civilization is going to be the most diabolical, the most terrible thing that's ever happened on the earth. And unless we humans get back to our own spirituality and start thinking in terms of being in contact with our divine essence, and ultimately there will come a day when we're going to have to realize we are not alone in this universe. And whoever it was that created us, and the mere fact that we are created implies a creator. And whoever it was that created us, I am sure they're watching us. It is my personal opinion that we are not only being visited by extraterrestrial life forms, but they are in fact leading the world. I think that we are being led by other world intelligences right now. And I think that there's going to come a time when whoever created us is going to deal with this hidden agenda. So I think we are all on the cutting edge of something brand new that's coming on the earth. Human freedom is going to rise again.
When you talk about high strangeness, you have to kind of look at the whole of history. Historical events, things that just don't make sense, and the things that kind of fuel the conspiracy theories of today. And the reason why I always had a problem with these conspiracy theories, that there was this secret, group that was controlling global affairs for hundreds of years, is because it just didn't make sense, because people are just naturally inconsistent. And to be able to hold together this vast conspiracy for hundreds of years, it just wouldn't be possible. But when you look at the non-human intelligence angle and the high strangeness, a picture begins to appear. And it's something that connects conspiracies of vast scales, things that date back as far as I can remember. Even in the history books of World War II, the strange coincidences between JFK and Lincoln, their assassinations, their life, their secretaries, all of it. And then you get into the more recent huge cataclysmic events like September 11th, and a picture begins to form, and it's one of the most disturbing pictures, and I'm absolutely convinced that it's real. Stick with me tonight. I think by the end of this, if you don't get goosebumps, then I didn't explain this well, because the reality of it is glaringly apparent. It disturbed me so much that I even had to ask AI about it. I even had to go because there was nobody here for me to bounce it off of. My friends at work, there's just I just didn't have anybody to really bounce this off of. So I asked AI, man, because in the way AI has kind of framed it for me is kind of like a grand unified theory of high strangeness, and it's the point where political conspiracies and secret societies, UAP, all intersect. And the challenge I'm grappling with, the generational secret problem, right? And this is the strongest argument because this can't be a purely human conspiracy. Humans are notoriously bad at keeping secrets, especially over decades. However, the introduction of this non-human intelligence NHI changes the math entirely, and it's something that I never really considered. Kind of been on this Chris Bledsoe kick with the lady, and that this is a good, benevolent thing, and that may be, but there also appears to be some very evil elements to this also. And Peter Levenda, in his book Sinister Forces, it's a trilogy, and in his book, he argues that history isn't just a series of random events, but is shaped by an underlying dark current. He suggests that certain locations and events, like the JFK assassination, act as rituals or what people in the occult call workings, right? I'm going to explain something that's termed the synchronicity engine, right? And if an NHI exists outside of our linear time, which I have argued repeatedly, or is capable of manipulating human consciousness, which I've also argued repeatedly, synchronicities like the Erie Lincoln and JFK parallels, and I'm going to show you a clip from Jordan Maxwell where he's breaking it down, dude, and it tripped me out. And when I first watched it, I thought this has to be BS. Then when I looked it up, all of these things were literal, just straight up crazy coincidences. And they aren't just coincidences. They are the fingerprints of an external influence steering human history and human destiny. And this is the problem of continuity, right? This is why the NHI angle fits. And kind of, I have to throw away the human conspiracy angle. I mean, I have no doubt that humans would try to harness this power to use against each other, right? So, I could see that being a definite thing. And I think that there's certain religions in the world that are doing it today, that are harnessing this force against their fellow man. If a conspiracy is purely human, it requires one, perfect recruitment, no whistleblowers for over 100 plus years, right? Consistent goals across generations. Heirs don't change their minds. So, your kid's not all of a sudden going to have a change of heart. You can carry out this generational conspiracy over hundreds of years. It just doesn't make any sense. And then the immense resources that never fluctuate, right? And the NHI hypothesis solves all this. If the management is non-human, the continuity is external. Humans would merely be the middle managers or custodians of a program they don't fully understand. They could be deluded into thinking that they're doing what is right, when in all actuality, they're fulfilling some evil entity's goals. And this aligns with what Congressman Tim Burchett and others have hinted at, right? J.D. Vance and Tim Burchett said, hey, if the rest of the country knew the things that he was briefed on, we would come unglued. This country would be, on fire. Because I think that if you look at 9/11 alone, September 11th, and the events of that day, and just it flies in the face of our concept of physics. Where have you heard that before? That these steel structured buildings would just collapse into their own footprint at free fall speed from a jet fuel fire that doesn't even burn hot enough to melt steel. And the fall of free fall speed, if you watch the video, the building 110 stories collapses in about 10 and a half, 11 seconds. 110 stories. So that throws out the pancake theory that they fed us with the commission and, you know, the findings. So it was a free fall speed. So a lot of people think that, you know, there had to be this conspiracy, there had to be, you know, they were thinking that certain politicians and political parties were responsible for it, that we did it to ourselves, but the evidence just didn't support that. And I don't believe it either. So that makes me believe that maybe a group of human beings could have possibly harnessed whatever these entities are, and that this was able to be pulled off in some kind of fashion that even today we can't wrap our minds around. Is it possible? And you look at the, you know, the history and these other synchronicities from the JFK assassination and World War II, and it all just, there's definitely something going on, and everybody that has a half of a brain can see that there's something going on. Is these all can't just be coincidences. There has to be something else at work here. And it wasn't until I experienced these crazy, strange coincidences in my own life that I began to realize that there is something underneath the surface. There's something else going on that I just don't understand, that we don't understand. And it just has hit me disturbingly. Tim Burchett, I think that and I think that this task force that Luna's running, and even with COVID, that whole thing, I think that there's a deception going on, a grand deception going on to get us attacking each other, to get us going at each other. That there's a nefarious force that's orchestrating a grand deception. And maybe the people that we're demonizing they don't even understand why they're being demonized, right? The optics of everything is bad, but maybe that wasn't their intent. And it wasn't until I found myself in similar situations that I had to start giving people the benefit of the doubt, to not judge them just off of optics, but that this is why that, you know, our court of law requires a certain level of proof, because optics just isn't enough. And I only say that to say this. I'm not saying that everybody who appears guilty is innocent. I'm just saying that there's people who appear guilty that definitely are innocent. And I think that maybe us trying to create this huge thousands of year conspiracy, it just doesn't work. You know, you go back to the Knights Templar and ancient Egypt and the Brotherhood of the Snake. I'm sure you guys know what I'm talking about. And we're going to watch some clips here today. So let's watch these clips, and then I'm going to come back. We're going to sum this up.
Whatever we're dealing with, it is a singular intelligence. These are various incarnations, various masks of one intelligence, one that is very ancient and that has been manipulating our species for eternity. That's why we're finding sigils and abductions, because whatever we're encountering, again, it's not an accident that esotericism is contacting them. It's because they're intertwined with esotericism themselves. When Jack Parsons was performing his rituals, he was also in contact with our federal government. And our federal government had asked him, do you think it's possible that during one of your rituals you opened up a portal and whatever these creatures are begin to manifest in this dimension? And he admitted to them, it is very possible they did incarnate into this world. Even the sigils, okay, that are on the craft, if their technology hasn't been inspired or improved by the same esoteric rites that are assisting us in our scientific method. There is a technology there. There are many things about this intelligence that doesn't just point to the fact that we live in a construct, but it's highly possible that it's maintaining it. And what we're looking at is some kind of intelligent life form that is a program in that it's working the environment. It's like an artificial habitat, and we are inside of it, and we only know it's artificial now because things are starting not to make sense whatsoever. whatever we're dealing with can create physiological constructs. If it has that ability to create something that feels real, appears real, you can actually capture on radar and sonar. If it can create something like that, then whatever we're dealing with is either in control of reality or it's replicating it. And if it's replicating it, my friend, then all of ufology has to sit down with the question and say, okay, what have we actually been studying?
Those who came before me with the Bigelow team called it a precognitive nonsense. What are they? There's a term. They refer to the phenomena at Skinwalker Ranch as a precognitive, sentient, non-human intelligence.
So there's
an intelligence based on the data. There is an intelligence operating on that ranch that has command over space, time, over consciousness, can manipulate closed systems in a split second without leaving a trace, and I believe has the ability to communicate if we can understand or develop a common language at some point to be able to interact. Eric Bard, in particular, has had communication with at least one of these entities involved with manipulating the systems that has command over the technology and the platforms, and has expounded on that a little bit. He'll be, I think, addressing that a bit more in the future.
That's alarming, right? These things that I'm showing you, it's painting a picture. And this is kind of why I've kind of gotten onto this high strangeness NHI train, right? I'm not saying that these are the same beings that we're seeing in the night sky, right? That maybe there's a multitude of phenomena going on and we don't understand everything, right? Maybe the experiences that Chris Bledsoe has with the lady and his experience, maybe those experiences are with benevolent beings, but maybe the beings that are responsible for these massive disasters and cataclysms and just, events in our history, maybe those synchronicities and those patterns that we see are the work of some very evil MFers, man. And the fact that there's definitely a possibility that there's humans that are using these forces against society. And if they would unveil this, if they would release all of this to the public, and maybe they're not going to tell us this straight out, like this is what it is. But I think that if they do declassify all these files and they do release everything about all these things, everything from Epstein to September 11th to JFK, which they've already released a lot of JFK and Epstein, but just dump it all out there. And then we start to look at history and historic events and these crazy coincidences in the past. And I think that those of us who have the eyes to see and the ears to hear will definitely see and hear what's really going on. I named this show Touching the Third Rail because these subjects are dangerous, right? There's so many different ways that this can burn me, or the dead missing scientists, and just all of it. There's so many different ways that this can blow up in my face. And basically that's what the whole term touching the third rail means. The third rail is the electrically charged rail of a subway, right? If you touch that rail, you're gonna get electrocuted. And basically with this show, I'm touching the third rail. We together are touching the third rail. We're looking at something that's dangerous. And I think that maybe these scientists, when they're just getting ready to crack these exotic propulsion systems and the ability to travel through space and possibly time and manipulate gravity, right? Because gravity is related to time also. Maybe there's an NHI network that doesn't want us to crack those technologies. So when people get close, these things happen. Because I'll tell you, Carl Grillmar, he was shot on his front porch by a whack job. I read the report. I looked it up. The guy was seen on his property with a gun, like, I guess, a couple months prior to this. I could be wrong on the details. The police arrested him, but then they released him, and because he had a rifle, but he really wasn't doing anything. He was just walking. But this Carl Grillmar lived out in the middle of nowhere in California. And so when they released the guy from prison, the guy went back and shot Carl Grillmar. He was one of the scientists that were in this cluster. And I just don't feel like he was a part of some grand conspiracy, because people that lived around there knew of him. They said he wasn't wrapped too tight. And I just feel like, a lot of these, I believe Nuno Loureiro was another one where it just clearly wasn't a conspiracy. It clearly wasn't like some vast, it wasn't a group of old men smoking cigars in an office somewhere, and you look at like RFK and that situation with Sirhan, and you look at JFK, and just it has the appearance that it should be a conspiracy. It should be a group of people who are orchestrating this. We're moving from the government is hiding tech to non-human intelligence is orchestrating human history. And this is a jump that most people aren't going to be able to make. And I understand it. It moves the conversation from politics into ontology, right? And this is the ontological shock that I think Lou Elizondo and these other people involved with disclosure are talking about. And this is why that this is a can of worms. How do you tell the public this? How? Please let me know in the comments. How do you tell the public something this massive and crazy, but definitely real, in my opinion? Listen, this is one show, I'm telling you, I think it's real. I mean, let's just look at the comparison, right? So the aspect, human conspiracy versus NHI social engineering, right? So let's look at the duration, right? So for it to be a human conspiracy, it's limited by human lifespan, right? But if it's NHI, high strangeness, social engineering, it's potentially thousands of years. Let's look at the secrecy, right? If it's a human conspiracy, it's vulnerable to leaky humans, whistleblowers, people that just can't keep their mouth shut. But if it's NHI, social engineering, it's protected by superior tech or psychology, right? Just other. And then look at the goal, right? If it's a human conspiracy, it's wealth, power, legacy. But if it's NHI and social engineering, it's unknown. Is it biological, energetic, observational? We don't know. Synchronicities. If it's a human conspiracy, it's subject to random chance. Humans would have a hell of a time trying to orchestrate synchronicities like dates and times and birth dates and who their girlfriend was and what year she was born or whether he drove a Cadillac or that one. But you see repeatedly through these stories and these crazy situations that these synchronicities are lining up. And it's not only happening on a grand scale where we're looking at historical events, it's happening to people in their daily lives. But if it's NHI and it's social engineering, then it's an intentional, it's a marker, it's a pattern, it's a signal to people who have the eyes to see and the ears to hear. Maybe it's a signal to the people who are possibly, I don't know, involved in some way. I don't know. So then it brings you back to like David Icke and the things that he said. And all of a sudden, David Icke doesn't sound so crazy. Now, do I think it's like some kind of reptilian, lower fourth dimensional beings that are behind it? I mean, I don't have a better hypothesis, but I don't know if that's it. But maybe. But this is an interesting note, right? Many whistleblowers, including Lou Elizondo and David Grush, have used the word somber to describe the realization of what this NHI presence means. It suggests something much heavier than just aliens exist. Could this be why people who were briefed on this, and the one gentleman I believe was briefed for like days in an underground bunker, and he cried himself to sleep for a week. I did an episode about it. He was like in Reagan's cabinet or something. He was the head of the Department of Energy or something like that. I could be wrong on the details. This is a massive, deeply disturbing concept and subject excerpts from Peter Levenda's Sinister Forces that bridges this gap between the JFK assassination and non-human intelligence involvement. And I know that sounds crazy, but if you look at these synchronicities I'm about to... So Peter Levenda's Sinister Forces trilogy, specifically book 1, The Nine, provides the connective tissue between the JFK assassination and non-human intelligence by moving the argument away from simple political motives toward a theory of ritualized history and psychological control, right? And so the first one was the Wandering Bishops and the American Orthodox Catholic Church. Levenda identifies a bizarre synchronicity. Multiple figures connected to the JFK assassination were members of a renegade Ukrainian Orthodox Church in the Bronx. And the link was both David Ferry, a suspect in the Jim Garrison investigation, and Jack Martin were priests or bishops in this obscure sect. And the NHI connection here is that, you know, the same church group has historical ties to individuals involved in early contactee circles. And Levenda argues that these wandering bishops act as a recurring occult presence, or like social engineers who appear at major trauma points in American history. The Nine and the Lab 9 experiments, right? So Levenda draws a direct line between the JFK assassination and the mid-century experiments of Dr. Andrij Puharich, who worked for the CIA Army on MK Ultra and parapsychology. And he was the one that kind of said that he had contact with this being or group called the Nine, and it was these... had to do with Egypt, right? In the research, Puharich, he claimed to be in contact with this group of NHIs called the Nine, which they identified as the Ennead of ancient Egypt, right? Like Ra, and, you know, which is kind of strange because Chris Bledsoe kind of thinks that the lady is Hathor, right? But anyway, back to JFK and this bridge between NHI and the JFK assassination. Levenda notes that high-level political figures and families, including some connected to the Kennedy administration and the subsequent deep state, were involved in these seance-like sessions. He suggests that the JFK assassination may have been a working or a ritual designed by or for these forces to shift the American collective consciousness. And one of the things I just want to like point out here is it possible that intelligence agencies were using these occult practices, seances and stuff? Did they experiment with this to try to use it against their enemies or their political enemies, you know? Once they seen that this was possible, is it possible that they continued to use it and maybe still use it today? Let's go further, right? The Seven Sisters and symbolic logic. Levenda posits that certain historical events are too synchronized to be purely human. I agree. He uses the term symbolic logic to describe how NHI might interact with our world. And the concept, NHI does not communicate through emails or memos or, you know, even the spoken language. It communicates through trauma, ritual, repetition. The JFK application, the similarities between the deaths of Lincoln and JFK, the Lincoln-Kennedy coincidences, are viewed by Levenda not as trivial, but as evidence of an external script being run on the human population. The assassination was the sacrifice of the king, a ritual archetype mandated by these sinister forces. And then you get into like the deep state as a custodian of the secret, right? And in his later work with Tom DeLonge in Secret Machines, God's Man of War series, Levenda clarifies this further. And the argument was the conspiracy isn't about hiding a few flying saucers. It's about hiding the fact that human history has been steered by NHI for millennia. And this is kind of what I'm starting to realize. Kennedy may have been moving toward disclosure or cooperation with the Soviet Union on the space UFO issue as suggested by the leaked Byrne memo, which would have violated the prime directive of the custodians managing the NHI presence. And the other thing about Kennedy was he had made a speech about secrets, secret oaths, and I'm going to play a clip of that here. It was eerie. Like, what was he talking about? And I almost felt like he was talking about secret society. I believe he was, because he actually says it at one point in that speech. But here's the key takeaways, right? Levenda's research suggests that the third rail isn't just a political secret. It's an ontological one. So there you guys have it. I showed you the clips. I broke this down for you. I don't know how you guys feel about it. And here's the thing. Every time I feel like I know, oh, I figured it out. I know what the phenomenon is. I know what we're dealing with. I know, I always end up falling back and realizing I don't know shit. So I think that, but this situation with these synchronicities and the way that these events happen and the events in people's lives, the experiences that people are having are real, and that we're not crazy. And I think that this stuff has driven people crazy in the past. I think if it happens to somebody who's not all the way balanced, it could send them over the deep end. And I believe that, there's probably quite a few people that ended up in a psych ward somewhere because of experiences such as this. And that's a shame. And it makes you wonder, rethink the whole thing about like schizophrenia and, are these people being tormented by something not human? I don't know. Let me know what you guys think. This one was kind of crazy. Hit me up in the comments. Please like, subscribe, share it to a friend, share it to 2 friends. See you tomorrow. Peace.
The truth they didn't want you to know. Look at what they're hiding.